Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the March meeting of the Climate Change Nature Recovery Service Transformation Committee. We've just got one substantive item on the agenda today, which is Section 6 Biodiversity Plan, and really pleased to see officers from the Nature Recovery team, Nature Conservation team here to help us through that. So I'll just run through the standing items. So have we had any apologies for absence?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apology from Councillor David Phillips.
Thank you. And are there any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest from any of the committee members? No, I'm not seeing any. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look through the minutes from our December meeting. So this is the last formal meeting we had, because in the meantime we've had a workshop type meeting. Are we all happy? Can I see a proposer? Yeah. Councillor Baker and Councillor Keaton is seconding those. So we're happy that those are a true record. Thank you. Okay, so without further ado then, I'm handing over to Councillor Hopkins to introduce the Section 6 Biodiversity Plan. I would just say it's really great to see this come to committee, because a fairly substantial piece of work we did earlier in the year was around the Nature Recovery Action Plan, and this is the sort of Swansea Council element of that, I suppose, is the manifestation of that. So yeah, over to you, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Much appreciate the opportunity to present the report today. I think it's an exciting time, but I will say this is very much an action plan. So in doing that, it's not setting tablets of stone. It's a working policy document that we will continue to develop along the way, subject to not just finances but commitment. But as things change, so this document must always be that moving sort of quicksand of how we can change to adapt and make things better in many cases. But I will say this is the opportunity for this committee to look at this prior to it coming to corporate brief and on to council and cabinet at a later date, to make sure that the policy right, to make sure what we are thinking as officers and as cabinet members, have we got the right focus on this? And I think it's really exciting me to be part of this, because this is something we've been doing with Section 6 for some time. It's been a corporate responsibility to report it, but we bought into it. I think we've done a very good job. I know Mark has joined us now as a lead on our biodiversity officer, and Deb has been banging the drum for many, many years, I must say. So for me, it's a great opportunity for this committee to look at it and reshape it going forward. What I would say, don't think this picks up that well at the moment, is our involvement with schools. And I know I've spoke to the Cabinet Member for Education. He's very keen that we build on that success. And I think it would be nice if we could get something within the report, so that when we get to Cabinet, that we highlight the good work that goes on, particularly in education in our schools, of what happens with biodiversity and everything else. So very keen to support and answer any question I possibly can. But I'm sure we've got plenty of officers here who knows far more about it than me. So happy to hand over to Paul first, and then obviously Mark again.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just sort of set the scene in terms of how we got to this point, and then I'll hand on to Mark and Deb, and they'll talk through the plan in more detail and pick up on the point that Councillor Hopkins just mentioned. So just to sort of refresh memories, the Environment Wales Act 2016 introduced a statutory duty for public authorities to maintain and enhance biodiversity in the exercise of its functions, referred to as a sort of Section 6 biodiversity duty, which we are obliged to report to Welsh Government every 3 years or so. Around that time, then, we had quite a thorough scrutiny into natural environment, nature recovery. It led to a number of recommendations which were implemented and monitored over subsequent years, and it led to a number of changes in the way we did things as an authority. One of which was appointing a biodiversity officer. Mark is with us today. We set up a nature recovery program board at the time. It's now climate change and nature recovery, and has diversified from officers to include members as well. But probably more significantly, we had an additional objective within the corporate plan relating to nature recovery and biodiversity, and that set out a number of steps and those steps were what we reported to Welsh Government in 2019, which is the first time we had to report on how we were meeting our biodiversity duty. Obviously, things moved on. In 2021, we declared climate and nature emergencies as an authority. Legislation was refreshed at a national level in terms of Welsh Government's objectives for nature recovery and an action plan at an all Wales level. The corporate objectives it included climate change then, and perhaps the objectives for nature recovery perhaps weren't as explicit as they had been previously, but it still served a purpose in terms of our reporting to Welsh Government in 2022. We're now thinking about our reporting in 2025, and as part of that, we think we certainly are looking at a more detailed action plan to work to, rather than reacting to steps identified in the corporate plan, and that's been helped by following the Welsh Government's local nature recovery action plan refresh. We've also, in partnership with numerous around about 50 different environmental organisations within the Swansea area, as part of the Swansea Nature Partnership, we have produced a local nature recovery action plan last year, and obviously the council contributes to that plan, and the Section 6 plan that's before you today is seen as the council's, not only the council's action plan, but the council's contribution to the local nature recovery action plan. So I think that's sort of the sort of process of where we've reached today. The plan has been circulated to all services. They've all had the opportunity to feed in. It picks up the various nature recovery and biodiversity objectives from plans and strategies across the council. As mentioned, it's not something that's set in stone. It's something that it's a document which would be regularly reviewed through the Climate Change Nature Recovery Programme Board and Steering Group, and it can be amended and added to as we go forward. So I think at that point, to perhaps explain a little bit more about the plan, I will hand over to Mark.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so in terms of the structure of the plan and any key points, so as has already been mentioned, like the actions in the plan are dependent on and subject to available funding and staff resources. So there is flexibility. At the minute, we have quite a lot of funding from the Welsh Government, but that's only guaranteed until the end of 2025. And then, yeah, the plan is set out in a table with a list of actions, and they are connected to the 6 key objectives in the Nature Recovery Action Plan for Wales, and also linked to the local NRAP that Paul has mentioned, and then with key departments and teams that are responsible for those actions listed within the plan. So the actions are a mixture or a combination of aspirational and business unusual. So there's some which we're already undertaking anyway, and we're just including it too. So they are mentioned when we produce our report at the end of 2025, where some of them are more long-term goals. So we don't have to achieve all of them by the end of December 2025. I think that's quite important to clarify. And that also the plan is for everyone in the council, all the different areas, not just our nature conservation team. We very much we're happy to support and advise, but we want to try and make sure everyone within the council is doing the key work. And then I think mentioned nearly everything. I think the only other thing I was going to mention was that when we produce our report to be published in January 2026, so for the last 3 years, we also plan to include any update to the action plan within that as one. So rather than have them as separate entities and documents that have to go through this procedure, we'll kind of combine them. And then finally, we're mentioning about schools. We have mentioned schools in the plan kind of briefly, they're classed as key departments, but we were looking at potentially one of the objectives adding in specifically about improving the management of council-owned sites. So there is one called 3C, and we're saying that we could possibly specifically mention schools in there. Don't know if Deb's got anything else to add at this stage.
Yeah,
You might have to.
yeah, I think Mark's pointed out the fact that this is not a nature conservation team plan. This is a corporate plan, and we tried our best to engage right across the authority, different departments and service areas, and a process of consultation with them has given us some of the actions they've actually taken ownership of. But it's keeping that momentum going through the programme board and having those regular updates on what progress we're making. So, I think it's a really good step forward, and it sort of formalises things a little bit further than they perhaps were before. So I don't know if there's any detailed questions on any of the plan itself. Or
Thank you, everybody. It's a really helpful overview. Are there any questions for members of the committee? Just to say, we've got Councillor James and online, and now Councillor Lawson's arrived as well since we started. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions or comments or feedback from any committee members. Sarah? Sorry, Councillor Keaton.
Yes, Councillor Fogarty, Chair. Yes, my ears pricked up when you said schools, and I thoroughly understand where Councillor Hopkins is coming from, because I've always felt schools and engaging with schools is the way forward as far as anything with biodiversity goes. Myself and my fellow councillor, we gave out little packets of wildflower seeds last year for Easter, in the hope the children would plant them, their parents would plant them, but also to make people aware that it's important to encourage biodiversity. So hopefully some got planted. I'd like to know how they're going to go forward, or if they have any actual plans to go forward within schools, and would it be possible to work with local community councils? I know our community council is very pro biodiversity and would be open to working with, which might help the budget a bit. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll come to Councillor Hopkins to answer on that one first.
I know we don't consider when to work with schools at the moment. I think the reason I wanted to highlight you today is so we celebrate that fact, because a lot of work have already gone on. But I think the core principle of the idea, it's not just our thing. Schools got to take ownership as well. And I think it's the same as every department. They got to be some buy-in from. And I think this should be up there with. I use the word very often. This should be up there with, as far as I'm concerned, with a safeguarding. This is everybody's responsibility. It's not just not just us as a body. So on the particular issue about town and council forums, totally endorse that. And I know we've got a training session tonight with one of Jane, I believe, is coming to our session tonight to discuss particularly our net zero commitment. So yeah, we'll take that on board, and I'm sure we can get a presentation from Paul and the team on biodiversity.
Thank you.
Deb.
yeah, just to say, we have worked with schools over many years, supporting them to improve their school grounds, as well as encouraging them to undertake field study visits on our nature reserves. And we have got a couple of staff who are trained teachers, including myself actually a long time ago, but who are working closely at the moment with some of the funding that we have to plant trees in schools, bring in planters and wildflower mixes. So it's not, we are and have been doing it, but we'd like to do more, I think. And there's a lot of other organisations out there like Trees for Cities, Keep Wells Tidy, who also offer help, and it's engaging with them. So, and the other thing I was just going to mention, Councillor, is as you're aware, the community councils have got the biodiversity duty as well. So they, should all be writing their own Section 6 plans, and we'd very much like to work together so that we can marry up, the overarching one for Swansea with all of the other individual ones that public sector bodies have to produce, including obviously ourselves.
On that point, could we perhaps take an action from, it's come from this committee discussion then, to when this has been through all of the process, to proactively share with town and community councils, because you are right, they will all be looking to draft their plans at the moment, and this acts as a really good kind of framework within which those more local councils can perhaps act. So yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
to be honest, I'd make sure that's on the agenda of the next meeting, that we get a briefing probably from yourselves to ensure that they are aware of that responsibility, and that will put them on the right road if they're not already on so.
Any other committee members wanting to come in with questions or comments? I've got a couple myself, but I'll hold them back until everyone's had their chance. Yeah, Councillor Baker. Yeah.
I'll get in there. Working with schools, it is good. They have been working with Blaen and Mice. They got their own polytunnel at the bottom end of the school. They redesigned the grounds itself at the bottom of the school. The children are involved a lot as well. And many of them go down to the city farm. There's a lot of projects coming up into the estate, onto different estates in Swansea, linking in with the city farm because they've had a vast amount of funding, which then they're going out to the people in the city to gather more information, teaching children on recycling. Now, we don't see a lot of that going on in school, which then, when you teach the child recycling, they'll take it back home, tell their parents where they're going wrong. Wildflower seeds, we put them out last year through the drop-in centre. We had a lot from one of the universities give us the gardening project because we won the Green Award. And we put a lot of wildflower seeds out with the children. They really enjoyed just walking along grass verges and just sprinkling the seeds. Some of them have said, oh, I've seen a couple of wildflowers coming up. And they're so chuffed just to see that little bit coming out the ground, wondering, how does it happen under there, Myra? I got asked. I think, why didn't the teacher explain you how seeds burst in the ground, how they divide, how they multiply? She goes, no, they're not taught these things, how seeds multiply, how you can feed yourself from one vegetable one year by having little ones off it to regrow the following year. They don't get the concept of it. To them, if you put it on a computer in front of them, they're all right. But put it down on the seedlings in front of them, they do completely get lost on the tracking of how seeds work, which way the diversity of it all. So I think it'll be good to get into the schools, more discussion with the children on about planting, recycling, keeping the areas tidy, and teach them young, keep them keen.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Baker. I think it will be good to reflect schools in the plan because schools are integral to a lot of the other work that has come before this committee. You know, in the Net Zero plan, we've talked about the importance of schools and working with children and young people. So yeah, totally endorse everything that's been said on that one. To give colleagues a chance to think of any questions that they have, I'll ask the first of mine, if that's okay. So I just wanted to ask specifically on point 4B. So within the remits of the council's responsibilities, we'll reduce instances of water, soil and air pollution, which feels like a very ambitious action. And I just wanted to know kind of how do we baseline that and how will we track progress so that we can kind of say, yes, we've succeeded on that, or no, there's still more to be done.
Thank you, Councillor. So we do have a pollution team within the council, and so they have various legal responsibilities under various acts, not even relating to the ones that we've been talking about today, which make sure that they need to monitor air quality and water quality, and also make sure that soils are being looked after. And they also do that in collaboration with NRW. So there are baselines out there which are telling us what the current levels of pollution are, and then those legal responsibilities do encourage us to then do more to try and reduce them, but hopefully by including it in our plan in particular, we can try and provide more funding. So one example is that we helped fund some IV green screens in a couple of schools over the last couple of years. It's still kind of ongoing in some of the schools, and to help with air quality. So it's kind of hopefully we can boost more pollution related things.
Great, that's really helpful. Thank you. I'm going to keep going until I see hands up, guys. As with the other point I wanted to pick up was you said it very succinctly, Deb, that this is not a nature conservation team plan, and that's really important, isn't it? That it's part of our corporate kind of approach, really. And I do actually think that that comes through really, really well in the plan, that there's a number of very specific parts of the council that have clearly signed up to be part of the plan, otherwise they wouldn't be featured there. So I just wanted to kind of congratulate the team on the engagement that they've done corporately. That's really good. And I suppose to draw attention to 3Gs, which is ensure that Active Travel Fund scheme maintains and enhances biodiversity in all its planned works going forward. I think it's really positive to see that in there. I was speaking to Councillor Stevens, who's the responsible cabinet member, about that, and he said, you know, it is something that they are already doing, but having it in the plan gives them that extra impetus to keep going. He cited the example of the Corsinan to Ponta de Lice scheme, which has already got features in it that aim to enhance biodiversity. So yeah, just really wanted to kind of make that's more of a point really than a question, but you can really see that work's been done to engage different parts of the council. So well done, and very much welcome that. And then my last thing was on action 4I, which is support actions that work towards the net zero 2030 plan to tackle the climate emergency, which also help nature recovery. So this committee has considered the net zero or elements of the net zero 2030 plan over the year. I guess to me that feels quite a broad action, shall we say. It could encompass a whole multitude of things. So I just wondered whether you have any further detail that you're able to provide to committee at this stage on that one.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so as you've mentioned, we've got our kind of net zero 2030 plan, and very much this specific action in the Section 6 plan is just to try and link everything together. So there's already a much more detailed plan of how we're going to achieve that published and approved. You know, there's the approved 30 actions by 2030 plan, which I think the Cabinet approved in December 2022. So it's about linking it together, because the Welsh Government mentioned that climate change is a key pressure when it comes to nature recovery. So that's why we wanted to include it as an action, but it's very much we're passing that responsibility on to the climate change team. And obviously we can work together with them like we do already, but it's for them to achieve those actions and then report them back to us, and that's where the detail will come.
Just to add, I think they are just about to commission a climate and nature adaptation plan. So that's another good opportunity to see the synergies between the two. So, you know, looking at the carbon sequestration value of certain habitats and managing the land, you know, and you know, some of the work that we do planting trees or managing other habitats like salt marsh contribute to the climate emergency and reducing carbon soaking up carbon as well as reducing it. So yes, there's a lot of synergies there, which I think we just need to draw out and cover those in the programme board meetings.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from committee member? Yeah, Councillor Lawson.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo Councillor Fogarty's comments on how good it is to see that it is a case of it being embedded in the corporate plan and being across so many departments, and the the collaboration that's gone into this document I think is going to be really important. One that I did want to ask about, because it's come up in my experience through scrutiny panel, is planning, the planning department. Could you maybe give me a little bit more detail on how biodiversity is going to be more incorporated into planning?
Well, it would be more incorporated. I think that the legislation and guidance is changing all the time in terms of strengthening the biodiversity requirements through the planning process. So that is a key consideration, a material consideration in the processing of all applications. Yeah, we've got a I know there's an objective there in terms of monitoring the conditions that we feed in to the decision-making process and the discharge of those conditions in the implementation of the permission. We recognise there's an issue around enforcement of conditions generally, not just biodiversity conditions, but this is what I think which one is it? It's one of the threes, isn't it? We're just focusing on the biodiversity condition in this document, and looking at ways of improving how we liaise with development management, just to ensure that, you know, the discharge of a condition when someone submits plans to satisfy a condition doesn't mean that that is actually going to be implemented on site. You need to go out and check that it is actually implemented in accordance with that. So there's quite a process involved, and it can be resource intensive. So anyways, we can look to improve the existing situation, the better. And it also in terms of planning policy as well, you know, because again, that's like a significant consideration for any proposals that come through. You know, that's, I know when I was involved in planning policy, you know, a decade or more ago, you know, that it was only passing reference to biodiversity is now sort of right up front as a consideration. So it's got a much higher profile than it had in the past. And you know, if there are no specific targets and a planning as yet, but I think that's something that's being worked up, and you know, as and when they are, you know, we'll introduce it into the action plan.
Just quickly to add, members will be aware that we, in the last 2-3 years, published the supplementary planning guidance for biodiversity. So if you haven't seen that, it is on the website. It's a really good document, and I think it puts forward a stepwise approach, which emphasises the importance of having an input at the very early stages of any planning development, rather than leaving it until the application is in and then commenting at that point when, you know, a lot of time and money has been spent. It's ensuring that we can get in the pre-app stage or the early stages, so that we can bring those considerations, you know, into bear right from the start. So I think that's been a bit of a step change, Paul, as well, hasn't it?
Yes, it certainly has, and you know, we're now previously the pre-app process involved just planning officers, but now we're around the table as well, which is great, you know, and making sure that input is right up front.
I'll bring in Councillor Hopkins on this question, and I see your hand, Councillor.
Yeah, well, I said, probably would have said that probably the relationship is better now than it's ever been, to be straight and honest. So I know that they sit under the same team. They come, when I have my monthly briefings with planning, then the same team is sitting around the table. Paul is representative of that team. And I know that when we're looking at the green infrastructure policy that we have adopted, the biodiversity, the planning committee are very, very heavily involved in trying to push biodiversity as much as we possibly can. And we now in the process of the new LDP, and there's lots of work going on behind the scenes at this particular time, because you know the placemaking policy means it. If we want it to be right, we want to be enhanced biodiversity. We want to build. We've got to build. We've got no option. We've got to build properties. You know, we've got probably the biggest waiting list we've ever seen for homeless applications, in excess of about 8,500 people. But it's not build at all costs. It's work in partnership with biodiversity and with our communities. And I think the relationship between planning and the nature department is probably the best it's ever been. That's what I'm hoping. Hope I got some nods around the table. Yes.
Seen some nods. Councillor Keaton, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Lawson and Councillor Hopkins. Yes, I'm glad you brought up planning. And I'm not going to bore you with SUDs, well, just a little. If the SUDs are planted, because I think as some people will agree with me, that when you do planning, it's amazing. You can sit there and think, are we in a different planet? Because they don't. They sort of seem to bring it up as lip service, a sort of side thing, instead of it being the central concern of you know, not just drainage, sustainable drainage, but also rain gardens and things like that are great things for biodiversity. And yeah, I agree. Dear gosh, you can't be a councillor without realising how many people need roofs over their heads. But it's not a decent roof over your head if it keeps getting flooded. So we really do have to make sure that the biodiversity message, as well as sustainability message, goes into planning and they really take it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask as a follow-up as well. So the LDP, replacement LDP, which you referenced there, comes up, I can see it at least once, but it's around ecological data being considered. are there opportunities within that process to also think about things like quotas for amount of space that's given over to biodiversity enhancement, for example? I'm literally thinking off the top of my head here, but you know, at that policy level, are we making sure that we've got all of, you know, using all the opportunities, because this process comes around once, you know, not quite in a blue moon, but not very often.
Yeah, very important point. And over the years, we've been improving the quality of our data on biodiversity and green spaces and green infrastructure. And as part of the LDP process, they have to do a green infrastructure assessment, which is happening right now. And we've fed in a lot of information to that. So, for example, we've produced some mapping on ecosystem resilience across the county. So, you know, all of that has been taken into account so that, you know, those areas that are of most biodiverse interest or most critical for other, you know, ecosystem services, whether it's flooding or food production or whatever, are sort of screened out. And that's happening right now. And we have been consulted on the candidate sites that have come forward. So we'll be screening and reviewing each of those and commenting on the ecological importance of those sites.
And in terms of development that then is part of the LDP, presumably you then stay involved in as to the nature of exactly what project goes on those sites, etc.
Because there is a requirement now for biodiversity net benefit. So, you know, that's something that all developers have to show how they're contributing to that, as well as the, you know, the obvious mitigation and compensation. But over and above that, they need to show a net gain or a net benefit. So that's something we, again, are advising, working with developers to advise on.
That's great. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? No. So I think what I've heard has been, you know, very much welcome this plan and the time that's been taken on the collaboration, as Councillor Lawson mentioned. So with that discussion we had around schools and how that will feature in, I think we're ready to move to a vote. So it will be voted on now, and then it goes to Cabinet, and then if Cabinet approve, it goes to Council. So we're the sort of first step of that long journey. So is everybody, are we happy to vote, if I can see votes in favour of approving this? Yeah, I think that's unanimous. That's great. Thank you very much, everybody. That's all I need to do on that one. Yeah. Lovely. Okay, so the last point on our agenda then is just to look at the work plan, which we do every time. So we've only got one meeting left of this municipal year. And what we've got on the work plan there is to invite colleagues from the Waste Department back to receive an update on the work that we've been feeding into on the waste strategy. I'm conscious that we have got the public EV charging strategy has been on our to be confirmed for the entire year. I would just say that I've been made aware that it has been quite substantially looked at through scrutiny and also looked at as part of our sustainable transport discussions. So if committee are happy, I'm actually minded that we don't try and squeeze it into this municipal year. You know, it just feels like we'd be duplicating a little bit of the work that scrutiny have done. I will need to confirm that obviously with the team and the cabinet member that they're happy with that as well. But is everybody kind of in agreement with that approach? Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. In that case, I will see you in about 6 weeks' time for our next meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.